Welcome to Real Time Review. I'm your host, Jesse Nussman. With me again, fellow Atlanta film critic Jason Evans. Jason, happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you.
It's that magical time of year when families and friends are gathering together, and what do? They go to the movies. And so
I love going to the holiday movies.
Yeah, it's always, I don't know about you, I have so many both good and bad holiday memories of going to movies that maybe the rest of the family didn't want to go to, and we'll skip that for now. But we're going to talk about kind of two of the biggest holiday releases that we've saved for this episode, Color Purple and Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom. Let's start with Color Purple first, because it's a film that actually was shot here in Georgia.
Yeah.
I feel like, it's highly anticipated because it's not only adapted from this great book and is a remake of this classic movie from the 1980s, but this one more directly is adapted from this very successful Broadway adaptation of the material. I'm curious, what did you think about it?
So I love the original Color Purple movie. I've never read the book, and my understanding is that the Broadway play that this is based on adheres more to the book storyline as opposed to the movie storyline. And as a result, there are aspects of this film, I don't want to necessarily say they were surprising, but they weren't necessarily what I completely expected. That said, I hate to say this, to me, it wasn't nearly as good as the original movie. And I found that I didn't connect with the characters as much as I did first time around. I think that, and as a result, the movie really suffered. I think part of that is the actors aren't quite as good. I'm not saying Fantasia Barrino's a bad actress, but she's just not Whoopi Goldberg in this role. And there's no one who, frankly, is Danny Glover or Oprah Winfrey, who were magnetic in the original movie. But to me, the biggest thing is, and I know they were making an adaptation of a Broadway play, a Broadway musical, the songs dragged it down.
Interesting.
I feel like the movie didn't spend enough time, A, developing the characters, B, advancing the story, because we were taking these timeouts every so often to do a 3, 4, 5 minute long song. Songs aren't bad, but very few of them advance the plot, in my opinion. I think the best musicals are stories where the music takes you further along in the story. I talked about this when we were talking about Wonka, that I felt like the songs in Wonka advanced the characters, advanced the story, got me into the characters. And in The Color Purple, again, though the music is nice, the singing voices are good, I don't feel like they advance the story. And as a result, I have an almost 2-hour movie that has about 40 minutes or so of songs. So I've only got about an hour and 20 minutes of story compared to the original movie where I had 2+ hours of story, and just, it didn't work as well as it.
I probably like this movie a tad bit more than you do, but it's interesting. I actually rewatched the Steven Spielberg version from 1985 over the weekend, and I wonder if there's maybe something a little bit works against this movie in having it be a musical, in that in the Spielberg version, you have this sort of mixture of the sort of terrible things that the Whoopi Goldberg character, or in this case, the Fantasia character, that CD is going through. And I think that balancing of kind of like that hardship really makes kind of the moments of empathy and kindness, and certainly where the movie winds up at the end, all the more powerful. And maybe there's something about this being a much more kind of glossier musical that you kind of lose a little bit of that edge. And I think while I sort of like enjoyed the kind of pizzazz and the musical numbers of this, you're sort of being given a little bit of a pleasure dose, if that makes sense, of that kind of like throws off, I think, the ratio of, needing the bit of that bitterness with the sweet in order to make the sweetness really stand out, and maybe kind of giving yourself a little bit of a relief where, like, yeah, this is really terrible what's happening to Celie, but I mean, this musical number is really, really fun. And maybe that kind of works against the movie in some ways. There is another part of me, though, that is like, an adaptation like this, maybe it serves a purpose in that, look, if you're someone who maybe can't afford to go see a Broadway musical, or has, can't get out to New York, or missed it in its sort of traveling production, this is, I think, like a fairly well-produced, sort of well-casted, well-made version of kind of what it is intended to be, and that just sort of a straight adaptation of this Broadway musical. So I'm sort of two minds of it. I kind of didn't mind the experience of watching it and was sort of entertained throughout, but would definitely agree with you that I think it's lacking in a little bit of the impact that certainly the Steven Spielberg version from the 80s had.
Look, I want to be clear. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think people who are looking for something to see if they really want to see this, that they will have a bad time at the movies. In fact, my bet is that this will do better with audiences than it has done with critics. But again, my comparison to the original is one of the great movies of the 80s. Mm-hmm. It was a Best Picture winner. And this film hasn't shown up on any critic, or very few critics' top 10 lists. And just, it doesn't carry the heft. It didn't move me in the way the first one did.
The one performance I will kind of like, point out from the movie.
Taraji P. Henson?
Actually, I think Daniela Brooks, who plays kind of the character that Whoopi Goldberg made so famous in the original, I think she's kind of the one person.
She's great, by the way, in Orange is the New Black.
Yes,
she is fabulous in that.
That's where audiences will likely recognize her from. And I thought, taking a role that Oprah, of all people, made really famous and iconic, and kind of making it her own and kind of being sort of like the real standout in all the scenes that she is in, I just really had to give her a shout out, because I think anytime she was on screen, I was like, this is a movie star. Put her in more stuff, please.
Yeah, I started to mention, I thought Taraji P. Henson, who plays, she plays the singer.
Shug, yeah.
Shug, yeah. She's excellent in this movie. Her voice really works for it. She has energy that I think really none of the rest of the cast has. Now, granted, that's part of the nature of her character compared to the other folks in the movie. I actually think one of the problems of the film for me was that the supporting performances are so strong. And I just think Fantasia paled a little bit.
They do sort of overshadow her a little bit in the way that doesn't quite happen with the Whoopi Goldberg version.
Exactly.
So let's talk about Aquaman, which
hard left turn here.
Hard left turn. This movie is I think odd and coming at an odd time, both because
we're at the superhero.
This really feels like
is gone.
It really feels like this is both in terms of not to get too kind of Hollywood insider, Warner Brothers seems to be kind of rethinking how they're sort of adapting a lot of their DC properties.
Kinda? They basically, this was done and finished, and they went, okay, well, I guess we'll release it. But the reality is, it's not leading to anything.
No.
And it frankly doesn't tie anything up. It's finished, so they'll put it out there. They hope it makes some money.
It's sort of a leftover piece of a discarded universe.
The DC universe that existed, that this was a part of, is gone.
So that already kind of gives this movie this awkward sense of not really mattering.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, we are kind of ending the year of one of the big talking points has been, have we reached superhero fatigue? Because you have all of these big superhero blockbusters that have kind of been bombing at the box office this year, except for the Spider-Man movie.
Well, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy are the two ones that did okay. Every other one of them, not only, I think, bombed, maybe doesn't even cover it. Every other superhero movie we've had this year has done significantly, way worse than any expectation would have put it.
So
let's get to Aquaman now. Okay.
Yeah, it's just, this is kind of just an odd duck of a movie for me in a lot of ways. In taking away all that context, this really feels like a movie in which everyone involved kind of didn't really know or didn't really come onto the same page about the kind of movie they were making. Forget even tonally, but I think even story-wise, this kind of feels a movie that's grasping for random strings, and every creative decision from, I don't know, should Aquaman have a son this time? Should he be married? Oh, I guess we should bring back Patrick Wilson. What if there's a Lost Kingdom of Zombies? Can we throw that in there? What if every decision sort of feels like there isn't sort of a confidence behind it? It all feels sort of yeah, I guess we could do this. Does this really matter? Who knows?
Well, so first of all, I'm just going to come out and say that when you're making a superhero movie with Jason Momoa, at least the way he's been acting ever since he left Game of Thrones, he brings a lot of humor. I actually think the guy's a comedian. He brings a ton of humor to all his roles, and this movie, your initial point, it does feel a little up and down, because it goes from Jason Momoa cracking jokes in the middle of fights and stuff like that.
Pretty much all his lines are just straight one-liners. They're all punchlines to a joke, even if there's not a setup to the joke.
Yeah, it goes from that to babies are in danger of being killed and the entire planet is going to be destroyed by greenhouse gases.
Yes, did we mention this is a climate change allegory as well?
It is so wildly divergent in that kind of way. At the same time, I'm not going to be as cruel to it as you were. I wasn't a huge fan of the original Aquaman. I like this one better than the first one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I actually thought that the story was a little bit, you're right, the story is kind of bringing
kind
in
of
stuff
all
all
over
over
the
the place.
place.
But I followed it better than I did in the first one. It didn't have as much blurry, confusing CGI action as the first one did. I actually, in the first movie, two people would be fighting and I wouldn't know who they were or if I should be which one I'm rooting for and what they were doing. In this one, the action to me was easier to see and understand. I think Momoa's humor is really effective in this movie. The first 5 minutes of this movie were a lot of fun.
Oh, see, the first 5 minutes of this movie to me was like, oh gosh, we're really in bad territory. It was that kind of thing of like throwing up so much kind of awkward exposition, or I know we're kind of in a bad spot for a movie when it begins with like a voiceover of like, yep, this is me. Bet you've been wondering what I've been up to these last few years. And I was just sort of like, oh gosh, we're having to throw in voiceover because this plot's going to be too confusing.
See, and I enjoyed it. I thought a lot of it was Momoa sort of making fun of the whole superhero kind of world. I mean, a lot of this is him being like, I don't want this.
Right.
I feel like I have to do it. It's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't really want it. And I think he brings so much charisma to the screen that it really, like the first one, he carried in a big way. All the supporting cast in this movie and in the first movie, I thought, are blah. The only reason to go see these movies is because Jason Momoa is really, maybe not really, really good, but pretty good in them.
I feel like the novelty of the first Aquaman was kind of, the Marvel movies, they have this very kind of winking, sort of self-aware tone, and then some of the other DC stuff at the time is very like dark and serious. And there was something kind of novel to the idea that James Wan was like, this is a Saturday morning cartoon, and this is big and goofy, but also like we're taking this seriously. And I found that tone very appealing in the first movie. I think there is an aspect of it in this movie that I think the more over-the-top imaginative elements are I think the best part of the movie, but maybe some of that tone felt a little bit kind of like worn out this time around. And I don't know. We're clearly going to disagree on this, but I just kind of walked out being like, this is sort of the final nail in the coffin of the like year of superhero fatigue that we've been having.
I mean, the same way I said a couple moments ago, I want to be clear that I think The Color Purple is a good movie. I want to be clear, I don't think Aquaman is a particularly great movie. I don't think it's going to be lasting in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that this film is going to cause DC and James Gunn, who's now running the DC universe, to go, oh, wait, I need to keep this guy around.
Right.
He might, but I don't think that decision is going to be made based on this film. I just sort of think audiences know what to expect, I think, from these films. And I think they'll get what they would expect from an Aquaman movie. And I enjoyed the tone. The tone that maybe bothered you a bit actually worked for me. Those, to me, the best parts of the movie were when they were having fun, when they were poking sort of the fact that, like you say, it's a Saturday morning cartoon on film.
Well, we have one last movie to talk about.
Oh, our Christmas gift is to trash the heck out of this thing.
So this Christmas, we get a new gift from Zack Snyder, the director behind 300 and Watchmen and actually many of the other DC movies that we kind of just joked about now.
Yeah, exactly.
Now
the DC movies that are way too serious and have no humor, that's Zack Snyder.
The DC movies that are like, what if every time Superman fought, it was like 12 9/11s, and you basically just sit there being like, that's your take on this superhero?
Yeah.
So Snyder, from what I understand, had this pitch for a Star Wars movie that was turned down.
Yes.
And he decided to turn it into his own kind of original sci-fi blockbuster for Netflix. I should preface, own original 2-part sci-fi blockbuster.
Rebel Moon.
Part 1 of which we saw, Rebel Moon Part 1, the Child of Fire, which I don't think that is ever explained who the Child of Fire is.
It's never explained.
In the entire movie.
It was pointed out to me that there are no children in the movie. There are no children. There's no fire.
There's a woman who does call herself a child of war, but I think that's supposed to be something completely different.
Yes.
So I'm not even going to bother to describe the plot of this movie because I think
it's such a mess.
It would so convoluted, but this is, I think, one of the more unpleasant experiences I've had in a movie theater. And I feel like you and I owe the public a public service announcement that just avoid this on your Netflix queue this
thing is
weekend.
Actively bad. I have a memo for Zack Snyder, and it's real simple. Hey, Zack, characters matter.
Yeah.
This movie, you race from place to place to get the band together. They're essentially the plot of this film is they need to get a bunch of warriors together to defend a small farming village.
It's seven samurai.
It is,
the
exactly.
farmers, they're being raided by pillagers, or in this case, it's fascists from another planet and they need a
Whatever,
collection of warriors to save the day.
Yeah, but every time we go meet one of these warriors, first of all, they're not particularly interesting. They're not well fleshed out. We basically meet them, they do some task or fight someone or something like that, and then they immediately join our group. No compelling reason given why.
Right.
We never get to know the characters. We never care about the characters. There's one character who dies toward the end who I think has had like maybe 5 lines prior to that. And I think Zack Snyder thinks, oh, we're going to be really moved by his sacrifice. I was like, he's a bad leader and he just died and I don't care. You don't care about anyone in this film.
No.
Zack Snyder is he's not a good writer. That's just the bottom line here.
I would argue he's not a very good director, too.
Yeah. Well, I was starting with the writing because to me, the problem with this film is that it's just incredibly poorly written. It's not interesting. The plot, as we said, is simplistic. It's just bad. It's really bad, man. And I don't know why. I don't know how Netflix would give him this much money to make, because the film is clearly an expensive movie.
Do you think this movie is as expensive as it is? Because there were parts of it too that I kept thinking like, this kind of looks like they just sort of shot this in his garage and just put like green screen behind everyone.
I mean, that's what every Zack Snyder film looks like.
There's a lot of these kind of like big sweeping vistas with like moving ships and kind of planets in the background, but there's no sense of like movement or interacting with the world. The characters are just sort of like standing in profile in very kind of like, you know.
And anytime anything interesting happens, it's done in slow-mo.
Right.
It's like Zack Snyder thinks that putting it in slow-mo will make it more interesting to us, as opposed to being boring because it's going slow.
Yeah, he's clearly a guy that's like very influenced by like Frank Frazetta paintings and has this just sort of like affinity for kind of like very masculine, deadly serious fantasy stories. And I get that influence on here, but I think it becomes a little monotonous in terms of its tone. Like the characters you mentioning, literally like, it's not even just that like these characters are given like very little personality or explanation for like why they're joining this sort of ragtag group of warriors. It's that every person in this movie is kind of the same character archetype, which is like stoic warrior. Like the farmers are stoic warriors, the villains are stoic warriors, the stoic warriors are stoic warriors, and it just kind of creates this sort of energy of sameness around the movie. And this really felt to me like if this was sort of inspired by Star Wars, this is kind of the Star Wars movie for someone who wants like a needlessly edgy, like R-rated Star Wars movie. I don't know what the rating of this movie is, but you know, someone who's like, I really wish I had more like rape and pillaging in my Star Wars movie, which is a baffling thing, I think, to think about. And it really just felt like a big space opera without any sense of joy in it or any sense of fun, and really just felt like a slog and super unpleasant to sit through.
Look, when this movie ended, we were in the theater with nothing but critics. Every single one of us was like, I can't believe I subjected myself to that piece of bleep.
Yeah.
Everything about it is bad. I mean, we don't need to go on talking about it. The bottom line is, anyone thinking about seeing it, don't see it. And I really don't understand why Netflix thought this was a good idea, other than they want to appeal to the Zack Snyder fanboys, who are a powerful force, but
and we'll probably
a force
all
for good or a force for evil.
Yes. Well, we should probably stop dunking on Zack Snyder before his army of Twitter bots comes after us.
Our Twitter mentions are going to be bad.
Yeah. But Jason, as always, thanks for stopping by. Everyone have a delightful holidays and stay tuned next week for our Best of the Year episode.
Good stuff coming.